Live. I'm not wearing a shirt today.
Good.
Yeah. I'm wearing a regular shirt. I'm a regular folk today.
You're simple folk.
Simple folk. But Joe is still in celebrity mode, as you can see.
You're deplorable. You're one of the deplorables.
Yeah. Like a pleb.
Yeah.
Working class. Lesser than. Not the elite.
Exactly.
We want to start with Russell Brand?
Go.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get this up on screen. For me, it's the image. I mean, the allegations are one thing, but the graphics are, as usual, over the top from the media. This happened yesterday. Sunday Times exclusive leak Saturday night. Headline: Russell Brand accused of rape, sexual assaults, and abuse.
Yeah, it was everywhere.
Check out the image. Scroll down a bit there.
Yep.
So, whoever did that, Her Majesty's Secret Service congratulates you on your brilliant graphic work.
Yeah, well, it's either like deliberate intent to portray him in the worst possible light, or it's just yellow journalism, you know. I mean, or maybe both, you know, sensationalist journalism, you know, because obviously that image attracts attention, right? Red and white and the scary eyes and stuff. You pick that one, you put it up there. So, to portray him in the worst possible light in advance of any actual any actual substantiated allegations against him, except by some supposedly Channel 4 and
Sunday Times, Channel 4. Channel 4 is one of the UK's top broadcasters, TV, and Sunday Times / The Times.
right.
Definitely legacy media for Britain.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. But I mean, it's got to the point where it's basically when if the media just puts up a headline or puts up an article, then that's the truth, according to most people. I mean, especially the Times, whatever, or put up or do a story. If you just throw that one up, for example, this is just from perusing. I got from perusing the actual story. If you just click on the left one there, there's a police statement on the allegations that the police just heard about from the media. You know, it's like criminal allegations, and the police finds out about them from the media, and when they're already, announced. So they basically said, we're aware of media reporting of a series of allegations of sexual assault, but at this time we have not received any reports in relation to this. If anyone believes they have been the victim of sexual assault, no matter how long ago it happened, we encourage them to contact police.
Yeah, any reports is unofficial. You know, go to the police, make a report.
Well, somebody, if there's a victim, come to the police. But apparently it's all done and dusted already in the media, right? It's all almost case closed. And then the second one was Channel 4, who produced this documentary, supposedly, or this investigation. And then
aired last night.
They said in a statement they're appalled, all of course, blah, blah, blah. Because, you know, to some extent, they would be in a certain sense responsible, because it happened on their watch when he was employed by them. But they said that they carried out an extensive document searches and found no evidence to suggest the alleged incidents were brought to the attention of Channel 4. So, like, we're squeaky clean. We're excusing ourselves in advance here.
Yeah.
So the shit we're throwing at Russell Brand, that can't reflect back on us, because we've looked and there was no evidence to suggest that anybody had said anything at the time that he was doing anything. So let me get this straight. Russell Brand is across all the media, more or less telling people that he's a sexual predator and rapist. And A, no one has reported a crime. And B, there is no evidence. At least there's no evidence at the time of the alleged crimes that any crime had taken place. So, what is there?
It's a hit job. We've seen this before. This is the same thing as they did to Assange, Corbyn in a slightly different way.
Right.
And Trump, actually. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. So the article says this is a joint investigation by the Sunday Times, the Times, and Channel 4. It clarifies that the media spent years, doesn't say how many years, but years on this report. I mean, like, there's a lot of resources behind this, obviously, in terms of staff and personnel and time and pay and so on. And we'll get back to that later. They clarify in the report that they found the victims. The victims didn't come whistleblowing to them or anything.
Yeah, they hunted them down.
Not the other way around. So it says in there that all 4 or 5, it's not clear whether it's 4 or 5, said that they felt ready to speak only after being approached by reporters. I mean, that right there is... who's grooming? He's accused of grooming
There's so many
young women 20 years, 15 years ago, but that sounds like grooming right there. Where you're seeking... did he say... And how did he really make you feel?
It's called digging up dirt, right?
Yeah. Can I just do one more extensive quote from the report to give you an idea of the scope and how they went about trawling for this stuff? So if you put that back up, Scotty, let's do a word search for... There's 2 paragraphs together that kind of are the nexus of these claims. Word search for over the past few years. Okay, it's these 2 paragraphs. Over the past few years, God knows how many years, but whatever, reporters have interviewed hundreds of sources who knew or worked with Brand, ex-girlfriends and their friends and families, comedians and other celebrities, people who worked with him on radio and TV, because for anyone who doesn't know, outside the US, Brand was definitely a celebrity before he became famous on doing podcasts, and senior staff at the BBC, Channel 4 and other media organisations. Along with these interviews, reporters have seen private emails and text messages, submitted freedom of information requests, viewed medical and therapist notes, scrutinized Brand's books and interviews, and watched and listened to hundreds of hours of his shows on the BBC, Channel 4 and YouTube to corroborate allegations.
Why didn't they do that for like Anthony Fauci over COVID, you know? Why didn't the reporters do that on him?
Because he's untouchable.
Because they believe him.
Because they believe him and they're afraid. Remember there was do you remember there was an executive, I think it's Sky? I think he'd retired by the time he felt safe enough to say it. I think it was Sky News. And he said, we did want to do lots of stuff, countering COVID stuff.
Mm-hmm. But we couldn't.
But we couldn't. But in this case, the messaging is very much the other way around. They feel safe in the knowledge that they have protection from on high to go after Brand in this way, and that their backs are covered legally. Maybe this is actually part of why this took a while before they could reveal the expose, because they have to get their legal things tied up, the legal ducks lined up in a row before
interview hundreds of people for a start before they could find anything.
To find 4.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean, that's weird. Like, I mean, it's almost like there's no evidence of any crime, so you go looking for one.
Pretty much. The worst allegation, worst, is the story of Alice. It's not a real name. Oh, by the way, they're all anonymous. You don't see them. They're not the real names, but whatever. Okay. Still, this is the worst. Okay, this is definitely what sounds like the worst. Worse in that she was 16 at the time, and he was 31 in like 2006 or something. 16 is the age of consent in the UK. There's really, like, the whole culture war and everything that's going on at the moment around the clear messaging in all of the respects coming from on high and through the media, through these organizations, is they're pretty much toying with getting people to just see pedophilia, the crime of crimes, right, when it comes to sex crimes, as, well, another variation. They're minor affected persons, whatever the euphemism is now. Well, in the middle of this report in the Times, they've got Alice's testimony about how he, basically would have groomed her. Part of her defense as to why this wasn't an issue at the time is that, well, I was young and impressionable. Of course, she definitely agreed. She's 16, but it is the age of consent in the UK. Okay. They have a little paragraph on her. Alice has decided to speak out because she now believes that she was too young to be able to consent to a relationship with an adult man. Interesting. So whose fault is that Russell Brand's fault, or is that the legal system's fault, or is that society's fault? I mean, is that the fault of predators who are trying to make you reduce the age of consent? Because all of the pressures are going in the other direction. Anyway, okay.
What was the actual allegation against Brand in respect to her, in regards to her?
That in a particular hitherto consensual exchange at a hotel room or his house, I'm not sure which, he, quote, came on too strong and forced me to give him a blowjob.
Okay.
I didn't want to, and I was physically...
How old was Brand?
So there's a definite claim that it was against my volition. I said no, and he pushed for it.
And how old was Brand at the time?
31. I know.
Yeah.
Well, I know. And who's going to defend that? This is why they have a nice little... All their trawling has worked to find something that is indefensible, prima facie on the surface of it, definitely. But I suppose where we'll go with this is, but hang on a second. Okay, it's going to be his word, her word as to whether that was consensual. Okay, let's put that aside for a second. But then there's the cultural context. Legally, that's kosher. 1631, okay? Now, it's interesting what she says about this in hindsight, now as a woman in her 20s, I guess. She now believes that she was too young to be able to consent to a relationship with an adult man. Objectively correct. But officially these days and culturally, that's fine. Okay. Right. My mum, she says, still feels that she failed me in some way because her parents were warning her, you don't want to do this. Because they knew, again, Brand was unknown, he's a celeb and all that. And had a reputation as a womanizer. My mum still feels like she failed me in some way in allowing this to happen. But she had no recourse at all because the daughter, was like, I'm going for this, of course. But she's allowed to. So says society, right? She says now, she's like active. She basically taking a conservative position now. She says it shouldn't be legal for a 16-year-old to have a relationship with a man in their 30s. There should be something in place to protect children.
Yeah. Too late.
Further down, FYI, it says Alice, who later worked at Channel 4. So she knows the people who approached her for the stories. They all know each other, for God's sake, at the BBC, Channel 4, in and out, celeb world, entertainment in the UK. It's notorious how well they all know each other and who's shagging who. This is Britain, for God's sake. Moral standards when it comes to sex.
Right.
This is a story as old as the 1960s Profumo affair, when it was a kind of a mini Russiagate / sex scandal wrapped into one. And the titillating part that caused the government to fall, or specifically a government minister to be fired, was that he had inappropriate sexual relationships outside of marriage. Morally bad. But everyone knows behind the scenes that everyone's shacking everyone else, kind of thing. And it's murky as hell, right? So I love that. And it was just an aside towards the end of that Sunday Times article. Alice, who later worked at Channel 4. I see. So you know her really well. They know her far better, or at least some of the people involved in producing this expose know her far better than Russell Brand ever knew her. For him, God knows what he was like. He's described very well what he was like. He was a drug addict before. He got over that, and then he became a sex addict. And then he had to get over that. And that's part of why he's such a manic kind of high-energy guru-like person today, because he's had a couple of epiphanies to get free of that.
And there are groupies hanging around people like him for a long time, especially young girls and stuff like that. So it's really nothing to see here. Happens all the time, but like we're saying, it's a hit piece because the media, and you have to assume maybe their handlers in the government have decided that Brand needs to be taken down. Brand needs to be subjected to the classic smear job to try and discredit him, because he's saying things that I don't know if everybody who listens to this knows what Brand talks about, but it's basically pretty much similar stuff that we talk about, although he's a bit more kind of love and light and freedom and free love in a certain sense. He's a bit more kind of like New Age guru-ish about it, but he still basically hits all the main points of of the lies and corruption around Ukraine, COVID, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. He's smart how he does it. Questioning the narratives. Questioning, but it invariably will reveal political/philosophical beliefs, which don't fool the censors. In a sense, he kind of did fool them with COVID, because he managed to stay on YouTube throughout by being very careful to say, well, I'm not saying, but this is the latest. It was a bit like what we were doing, but he was maybe better at it. He was better at it. Come on, he's got almost 7 million subscribers now on YouTube. YouTube isn't even the main venue where he does the real meat of his discussions with people.
Well, I think he still has more views more followers on YouTube than Rumble. Like.
Okay.
Everybody does.
More noticeably, yeah.
Unless they're banned completely.
So there's a couple of levels going on here. This is a tweet from one of the women who is. It's all women. It's the writers of the articles were female. As it happens, the editor who okayed it for the Sunday Times is also a woman. I thought she did a great service to everyone here. Not that believers in the official diktats of how things are will even notice the hypocrisy in this statement, but this gets to the heart of the matter. Rosamund Irwin, who is media editor for the Sunday Times, tweeted yesterday following the publication of their articles, "If you believe in the power of investigative journalism, please buy a paper, as in a physical newspaper, tomorrow, Sunday. Or better, if you could afford to, please consider subscribing. There are huge costs of stories like this." Which gets to the whole heart of the matter here. With his millions of viewers and subscribers, Russell Brand dwarfs the subscribers of legacy media, the Times, the Guardian, Channel 4, BBC, etc. Absolutely dwarfs them. And they know it. And Russell Brand talks about it all the time. It's the ongoing descent into irrelevancy of legacy media. And look at, she's like pleading for funds from you, the public, to hear more of what was a costly effort to dig up and trawl the worst they could find about Russell Brand from 20 years of publicly available information about the guy because he was a bloody celebrity. And she give us more money to make more insinuations about people we need to put down so that the subs and the public funds come to us instead.
I mean, are people like her that clueless that they don't realize that what they're actually doing? They don't have any awareness of the fact that this is opportunistic and, highly targeted at brand and for likely, ulterior motives, I mean, do those people not even know? Do they not, doesn't ever cross their mind that this is a bit dodgy what we're doing here?
No, first level, or the main material, a substantive answer to that would be what we just pointed out, that her livelihood depends on her believing that. Right. So it's not the inducement for her to believe that is so strong.
It's monetary.
It's just like the COVID experts.
Money.
It's money, prestige, career. She's also a mother. Apparently, she's pregnant at this time. She has another child on the way. You can understand she has a vested interest in making this work. Her position. Okay. Here's an article from a year ago. This isn't the first time they've taken a swing at Russell, but this is definitely going to be this one might make or break him, depending on what happens next. You may remember this, March 2022, how Russell Brand, this is the Telegraph now, who's generally taken a more libertarian tack on these issues of free speech. Headline, how Russell Brand became, quote, the Mad Hatter of conspiracy theories. And check out the graphics for this one. He would say, well, yeah, I am. Listen to him. He is a Mad Hatter. But that's part of his charm, right? Now, the gist of this article, in as a hit piece. The crime, in quotes, a year ago, there's no sex crimes or anything. The gist of it was that Russell Brand is comparable to Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Now, do a word search for, it's actually the last two paragraphs, the pair share. That was all I was essentially saying, that he's like Joe Rogan. It didn't even say bad shit about Joe Rogan. The pair share, Brandon and Rogan, a great deal. Both are, quote, funny and fearless, says listener John Miltmore, who appreciates their ability to talk intelligently about complex ideas and provocative ideas. These are men who aren't afraid to poke at those sacred cows and to question authority. They share mutual affection too. You've emerged authentically, Rogan told his British counterpart during a marathon 3.5-hour episode of his podcast in 2019. This is who you really are. You found yourself. I'm not, the reason I'm highlighting those two paragraphs, because the gist of what they were saying.
Right.
And
there's nothing else. If
there's
there's any
else.
meat, that's the meat of
That's
their
the
argument
meat.
that he's a mad hatter conspiracy theorist.
And that would have been on the back of Joe Rogan horse paste. So he was painted, and then this followed in, okay, we painted Joe Rogan, and Britons are introduced to him if they haven't already heard of him. And by the way, segue, Joe Rogan, there's a British Joe Rogan you should also be wary of. So that's a year ago. But so for these people, that's enough. That's all I can say. There's the materialist explanation I gave before, that is privilege and stuff that they need to maintain. But I think they read that, and their internal values system is such that it adapts correctly to what's supposed to be understood.
Yeah, in answer to the long question, what crossed those people's minds in the media? I mean, they're authoritarians. Basically,
Yes.
they're authoritarian.
They don't think
they're
like
authoritarian
they don't
followers.
think like Russell Brand's
and they
followers.
don't like other people. Like people in the media, journalists, whoever in the media, see themselves as the authority on information, on informing the public and telling the public what's actually happening, what's right, what's wrong, what's true, what's false, and they're proud of that. They want to hold on to that. They're quite covetous of that position, right? And that's what they've been brought up in through journalism school and all that kind of stuff. To be programmed in a certain sense to believe that that's the role of the establishment media, and it's closely tied to the government. So when they see someone else coming along, other people coming along and trying to usurp their positions, they're a bit kind of. It's like you're getting on my turf here. You know what I mean? Get off my turf. Like you're the opposition, basically. So there'll just be a personal, ideological and personal interest in them, and they'd spin it in their minds that, because they don't like to think of themselves as hack journalists who just dig up shit on people and then spread it around to smear them unfairly, right? So they have to have do some kind of a mind job in themselves, but it's that mind job that they do in themselves is motivated by the fact that they think what they're doing is right, because ultimately this is the establishment. Having Russell Brand or Joe Rogan take the place of the establishment media is like overthrowing the government. And
that is mentioned there, that he's revolutionary and potentially dangerous.
It's equivalent.
They said that.
You overthrow the government, you overthrow the media. It's the same thing. It's terrible.
Yeah.
So
it's an acknowledgement that both are the same.
Yeah.
So when these media reports happen from private companies, we're not fooled by that.
Right.
We know what happened during COVID, when literally the government basically mandated the entire advertising
media
spaces in all media in Britain. That was unique, but it gave us the glimpse of what can happen. You can marshal
quickly and easily took control of it, basically.
All of it. Yeah. That's why the flavour of this, when it comes simultaneously from multiple organisations, it's like this came from the top.
Well, who is Brand and Joe Rogan? People, who do they speak out against? Who do they undermine? Well, they undermine the government, effectively, the government narratives, the official, truth tellers. They undermine what they say, and therefore it's the government that doesn't like them. But the media then is the messenger in a certain sense. Here's a message from the government. Yeah. Russell, I'd like you to check. There's a message from the government in all the major newspapers today that we published, in all our newspapers, like that we just put it up there just to convey the message to you from the government.
Yeah. And I've seen a lot of British Twitterati expressing their disgust at Brand, basically buying not so much buying it, because there is, you asked for evidence. They have evidences. Like some of the stuff they trawled is actual medical reports from when one of the women in California went to a rape crisis center that evening. Because she wasn't sure, was that started out consensual, but in the drama of what happened, I'm not sure. She got a medical report and stuff like that. So there are some evidences. But to see them then see the proofs, in quotes, and go, that's disgusting. I can't countenance that. These are the same people who will tweet tomorrow on the next day that they're all in favor of the full-blown smashing of all sexual taboos when it comes to LGBTQIA+. All of them. Of course your children should be subject to bombarded with
drag queens and sexual
demonstrations of sex toys in their classes when they're 4 years old. Of course they should. There's no disgust there.
Right. You're not allowed to have disgust there.
But it's almost exclusively channeled these days to an expression of a male, aggressive male, toxic male. And you know, men grow up, boys grow up, become men. Russell Brand today is married, stable, got kids. This shit's from 20 years ago in a milieu where it was encouraged or at the very least overlooked. Maybe, and the Sunday Times reporting does have some circumstantial backdated evidence that complaints were sent up and his bosses were like, carry on, it's just Russell being one of the boys, like all the other boys in here. Or Jimmy Savile, what did he do in 40 years at the BBC?
That was covered up because of what he was up to. He was a paedophile though. So you're allowed to cover up paedophilia and never let it out. It's the real tell. The authoritarians get disgusted when they're shown in isolation, something that is questionable, right? Morally, or repugnant. Oh, let's be honest. Let's say what it is. It's repugnant on the face of it, but they have an unbelievable, like, their brain can be compartmentalized externally to just ignore all the other stuff. The extent of pedophilia in high places. Check this out. For example, you can find thousands. Britain especially is a notorious environment when it comes to this, sex crimes that are covered up. Don't know why that is. One-time Prime Minister of Britain, Theresa May, did say, well, you know what, we kind of just have a culture of paedophilia, so best just get on with it. 2019, MI5 did not tell police of minister's, quote, penchant for small boys, inquiry hears. And that's just one minister. My God, there were so many. There were so many around that time, yeah.
It's like, and that's obviously about stuff in the 1980s, but it goes all back to the 60s and so on. And it's obviously more recent as well. But so it's so insidious because it's this is targeting, even putting aside the distinction between those who would see through it in quotes and those who would just go with their first taste bud disgust at the proofs in quotes that they're being presented with. The insidiousness of it is that their mind is focused into compartmentalized, narrowed down into the moral questions of relatively titillating factors of a younger man's life. You know, to trash something else entirely, which is the phenomenon that Russell Brand, as Britain's Joe Rogan, has become.
Well, to trash what they say in particular.
Yeah.
You know, they want to trash that brand. No pun intended. They want to trash Russell Brand, the person, not because of who he is or necessarily, but because of what he says. And I suppose that's, you know, intricately tied to who he is. But they want to stop him saying what he's saying, basically.
So
yeah, you got to conclude that. That's the bottom line. So it's pretty flagrant, but there you go. Although it does take a bit of teasing out because there's always that angle, you know. Well, there is something for him to answer for, blah blah blah. But yeah, everybody technically has something to answer for. the reason is, why are you forcing them at this point in time to answer for that? Why are you presenting them in this way? Why are you digging up dirt from 20 years ago right now? What's the context in which this is happening?
Yeah.
And if people don't understand the context,
It's
well, then
so
forget
like-
about it. If you don't understand the context, you don't understand.
It's literally essentially the same as the Inquisition, to be put to the question many, many years after something. Someone reported that you once did or said. So I put the question to you.
Mm-hmm.
And these educated Twitterati
Have you now, or ever have you
really believe
have
that
you ever been?
they believe that this is in fact the fine-tuning, just the cleaning up of the last vestiges of an archaic way of behavior, toxic masculinity in this example. And if we, that's how they'll frame it in their minds. When asked, they'll all say, yeah, I did evil shit in my past too, but it's best that we have a Me Too movement and a kind of a grand reckoning, and then we move on into the glorious future. There's just a few details we need to hash out, and like the gall of them to do this to Russell Brand, who has been so open about his life. His life was an open book, It's and God knows what stuff they're hiding. So
Anyway.
But can anything come of this? I mean, this would have to translate from a trial by media to actual charges, right?
Mm-hmm. In theory. Although maybe the damage is already done.
But what could the damage be that this would
Turn off any prospective people, or
Yeah.
people who might
Yeah.
might get turned on to Russell Brand, to turn them off in advance.
Right.
So to stop the rot in a certain sense, if if he's been growing in terms of his audience and more people attract to him, to stop, to try and turn off some of the people who have already, started following him or started listening to him,
Britain,
and to prevent more people from doing the same.
I heard it mentioned in passing. Is there a general election in Britain next year? I wondered if.
I don't think so. It's not scheduled, I don't think.
Okay, maybe there's rumours.
It would only be called, it's not scheduled, basically.
Yeah, the next UK general election is scheduled to be held no later than January 2025.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be next year. But is it done with that kind of foresight? I don't know.
Well, it's a term that you get for the party in power, you get 5 years.
Uh-huh.
So it goes 5 years. And then there's a forced general election, or if they want to call one beforehand.
Well, good luck to him. We'll see how it goes. It could, if he's lucky, it's just a hit at the level of information.
Mm-hmm.
Will reduce his numbers, following, and so on. And it's going to reduce sponsors or any other deals he had. A few people have pulled out. He apparently helps co-host a summer festival or something, so that's gone already. Stuff like that. So it will hit him financially. But it can go a lot worse than that. We've seen, like in other countries, a comedian in France was destroyed through lawfare. He just had case after case thrown at him, whether they had merit or not, until he was so saddled with debt from trying to defend himself with lawyers that he's reduced to. I'm talking about Dieudonné here. He's reduced to doing clandestine comedy stand-up shows in like farmyard barns, which can get busted if someone rats it to the police. I mean, that's how far you have to fall down when you're a stand-up / nationally renowned social critic about government and the powerful. So we'll see. What else this week?
But we didn't talk last week we talked about Morocco earthquake, but we didn't mention the flooding in Derna.
I think it was happening.
in
It
Libya.
happened the day before, and we didn't realize how massive it was. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty bad. Although it was caused by two. What pissed me off about it was it was caused by two dams that broke.
Yeah.
And a few million gallons or liters, whatever, water rushed down.
All of a sudden.
kind of valley through a beach at this seaside town of Derna, and just washed a lot of stuff out to sea and killed thousands of people. But the BBC reporting on it kind of pissed me off. Because obviously they go, well, how did this happen? It's an example of there being some level of kind of, some level of investigation rather than just sensationalist news. Oh, like flood, people dead in this part of the country, climate change, global warming. They at least, a few different outlets, said stuff like this, like Libya turmoil made Derna flooding even more deadly. So they referenced that, it wasn't just global warming. It was the fact that Libya's history, recent history, in terms of how it's been governed and stuff, made the flooding or damage from flooding much worse, And they call it Libya turmoil, but what they're actually referring to is the NATO bombing of Libya and destruction of Libya in 2011 and the murder, NATO's henchmen's murder of Muammar Gaddafi, who, while he was a dictator and stuff, had, the country was very well managed and very well financed, etc., and NATO in 2011 literally just destroyed all of that and killed him and left the country to rot since then. And that's what should be in that headline, not Libya turmoil. It should be everything I just said. It should be in that headline, and that's what caused this massive death toll from unnecessary large number of people dead from flooding. Because, again, it's not because there was a storm pushed through the area, it dropped a lot of rain, but it basically overwhelmed two dams that had not been properly maintained because of Libya turmoil, which is NATO's destruction of Libya 10 years ago.
Yep. So it's man-made climate change where asterisks, the men involved are Barack Obama, David Cameron, Hillary Clinton, and Nicolas Sarkozy.
Yeah.
It's Obama, Cameron, Sarkozy, Clinton caused climate change disaster in Libya.
Except it's not even climate change disaster. It's just
I know, but you know what they're saying is these things are accentuated or worsened, like this flooding event or the rainfall that preceded the flooding event, by man. It's your fault, the commoners. It's all of it. We're all in this together. We're all one. No, it's your fault. If we're going to apportion blame and describe agency here, it's your fault, not our fault.
Yeah.
I just checked. This is crazy. The death toll as of today, Sunday 17th, is 11,300 in Derna.
Mm-hmm.
Severely, Jesus Christ, here. This is crazy. There's bodies washing up all over the place along the coast. From the very same coast, so not far away, daily, hundreds of boats are leaving for Italy. You probably saw that story earlier this week. In one day, over 120 boats arrived in like an armada in Lampedusa, having left Italy. It's almost a parallel. It's not quite the same story. They're not Libyans fleeing. They're people coming from all over Africa. Anyway, that's CNN today. 11,300. Found dead in Derna. Scroll down. Let's see what the opening paragraphs say. 11. That's a mad death toll. Further 170 killed outside of Derna due to the flooding. Another 10,000 are missing.
Mm-hmm.
That's bonkers. Here's a comparative piece of data. So this is Storm Daniels. Remember I mentioned it last week, there was a phenomenal jet stream event which created an omega shape. So all the way through mostly Central Europe and Western Europe, there was actually a big high pressure. But the jet stream forced these two extreme storms at each end of the Meds, the flooding in Spain and the flooding in Greece, Bulgaria, and the Southern Balkans. For comparison, the death toll in the Southern Balkans, which was hit by the same kinds of rainfall as northern Libya was as of last week, the worst storm to hit Greece in 75 years. And Greece, I mean, Jesus, how much infrastructure investment have they had since the austerity crisis of 2008? They're not exactly rich themselves, but still, they have some, right? The death toll high is a whopping 7.
Mm-hmm.
According to VOA News as of last week. 7. 7 dead versus 11,300. 11,300. It's the same storm.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well, again, the death toll in Derna, that large number of death toll was as a result of dams. It was the dams. It wasn't the river. But there's, if you just throw up that link I sent you, Scotty, this is, you should just click on the left. This is basically a desert in Libya, so not far from, you can see Darna on the right there, on the right-hand picture. And I said before and after, basically this cyclone came in. Now the dams were, closer to Darna, so they're not the water. This is rainfall basically. So a lot of rain was dumped on the Libyan desert there, and you just go right to the next one. You can see actually a video. This is North African desert, and this is it now.
Is something objectively unusual going on. The similar thing was said in Greece, actually. That they're looking at possibly new lakes in central Greece that may remain there from here on out, caused by the rainfall. On Morocco, the death toll, as far as I know, is higher now. It's 3,000. That's pretty crazy for what was only a magnitude 6 point something earthquake. But it hit in a region that's not used to it. The buildings aren't made for it. Parts of old Marrakesh were destroyed. It's as hard to wade through the hysteria about climate change, I know, and this is a mainstream article, but still, I think this will underscore our position on this, that we can't just all shut our eyes off to this and say, no, it's all just a psyop to fool us. Shit is happening. So this is a headline, actually from NBC, but it's copied by Yahoo. 8 catastrophic floods in 11 days. What's behind intense rainfall around the world? Of course, they're going to give the kind of AGW, man-made, it's your fault. But they're noting the fact that there have been a lot of floods, major floods. The first 11 days of September, 8 devastating flood events have unfolded on 4 continents. True, one was in China. Again, though, that's what happens. It's kind of their monsoon season. Massive typhoons hit Hong Kong and Shenzhen region. They're more fortunate because they're developed now, and so they don't have the same kind of high death tolls they would have had maybe 20 years ago. Let's scroll down and see what else they remind me of. Southern Brazil flooding. I don't recall what that one was. That's a scene from Derna. The photo. Carry on. Go down there. Yeah. Sometimes we just have a clustering of these events. Yes. Sometimes we do. Yeah. And your AGW just does not explain it. Climate change is most likely having it. Yes, it is, definitely. Global warming is intensifying the planet's water cycle. Maybe. Is it warming? Is it human activity? No. It cannot be. We cannot affect the jet stream. The jet stream is way above our heads. That's like sun level influence, people. Cosmic. Way beyond us. Man is just, sometimes we feel like we really have conquered all. We've conquered nature. We can do anything. And it's so tempting to believe that because, we're all kind of pretty narcissistic, right? Down here, and everything's safe and we know everything there is to know. But we forget that imagine for a minute, we're not just single people and we're all connected as one kind of species. We're like this tiny biofilm on the crust of some of the earth. Most of us are actually packed into megacities. We're not even dominating the whole surface of the land of the earth, never mind the water. A tiny little biofilm. And there's a huge atmosphere above us. And the jet streams in the upper parts of the atmosphere. We didn't do that. It's way beyond us.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if you just can step out of your narcissistic bubble for a second.
Your anthropomorphic, I should say, and anthropogenic viewpoint. Yeah. Trump. What's going on with Trump? Trumpy dump.
He had a bit of a car crash interview, no, with Megyn Kelly.
All those interviews are car crash interviews, but they always seem to.
What is a woman? Some people would say. Jesus,
Yeah.
Donald. Tell us what you really think. We want the old Trump.
Yeah.
A woman is your mama.
Exactly. It's your mama. Let me just see here. There was a thing about, where did that go? Maybe it's further down. Yeah, it is. Basically, Trump has asked for the judge overseeing his case to recuse herself, because, well, his lawyers have, basically, because they said that he's biased, right? Or she's biased. She's biased. I'm just trying to find it here, what she actually said. There it is. So, yeah, I mean, she sounds like she's biased. But then, I mean, should we be surprised that she might be biased, that someone overseeing Trump's court case might be not very favourable towards Trump? I don't know. But basically, so she's the judge in his quote-unquote insurrection case.
In Georgia?
No. The insurrection.
That's Washington.
January 6th.
Federal.
The insurrection. You know what the insurrection is, Neil? You don't need to. Surely you know what insurrection is, right? You've heard about it a lot.
Yeah, January 6th,
right.
Obviously.
Not Georgia. Insurrection means January 6th.
Yeah. Georgia's election.
Interference.
Yeah.
So basically, in her comments, in her previous comments on the insurrection, she said this was nothing less than an attempt to violently overthrow the government, the legally, lawfully, peacefully elected government, by individuals who are mad that their guy lost. And she said about Trump, that it's blind loyalty, in referring to his supporters, I suppose, it's blind loyalty to one person who, by the way, remains free to this day. So Trump's lawyers have requested she be removed from the case, but, and as I mentioned there, the funniest actually part comes from the BBC journalist himself, who wrote this article about this topic. He said that the judge was randomly assigned to oversee this federal case against him. Like, I mean, how?
Why did he have to say randomly assigned?
How far does your head have to be up your ass? Like, how divorced from reality do you have to actually be? And having looked at the way Trump has been treated, all the actual facts about the way Trump has been treated over the past 6, 7, 8 years by the media, by the Washington establishment. Impeached twice, two attempted impeachments, impeached, but not removed from office, and then court case after court case after court case, insurrection, election interference, sexual abuse, all that kind of stuff, all dumped on top of him. How stupid or ignorant or gullible or naive do you have to be to think that a judge at the end of one of that long list of kind of like things that have been thrown to him to try and discredit him, that a judge in a case who said those things about Trump, how credulous do you have to be to think that, not only think that she was randomly assigned, but actually to write that in the article that you're saying, just to make the point, she was randomly assigned. It's almost like you're protesting too much. So why do you need to say that she was randomly assigned? Yeah. I mean, you're saying that just in case anybody might think that she wasn't randomly assigned, because it's pretty clear that any reasonable person would assume that she wasn't randomly assigned, given that So they're basically gatekeepers. People like that are gatekeepers of their own kind of like blinkered view of reality and attempting to usher or corral other people into that blinkered view of reality where you're not allowed to recognize what's actually happening. You're not actually allowed to recognize the facts in front of your eyes or what you see, and you're not allowed to make connections between those and draw obvious conclusions from them. If you do that these days, if you just look at what's happening and draw the most rational Occam's razor obvious conclusion to it, you're very likely, you have a very high chance of being accused of being a conspiracy theorist if you voice that conclusion. That's how bad it's got. Where you just look at what's going on in the world, you just take the basic facts and you say, well, there's this plus this, and that usually in the history of human experience means, A plus B usually means C. Have you been reading conspiracy theory websites?
You've been listening to Joe Rogan and Russell Brand.
You've been conspiracy theorizing, haven't you? It's like, no, I'm just looking at what's going on.
It's called thinking, morons.
Exactly, yeah. So, but apparently, so that was a few days ago. He asked to recuse himself, but then they pushed back and basically said that no, nothing wrong with that judge. She's totally impartial. She's totally impartial. Prosecutors say veteran DC judge Tanya Chutkan, that's her, statements in sentencing two capital attack defense. So she made those statements as she was sentencing two insurrection defense. She was sentencing them to jail terms. So she's not biased though. They don't show that she. Can you put it up there, Scotty? Do not. I'm reading from it here. There it is.
Paywall.
Anyway, it's only the top part. Prosecutors say veteran DC judge Tanya Chutkan's statements in sentencing two capital attack defendants do not show she has prejudged Trump. See?
The prosecutors say that, and she'll go, as the judge, yes, I agree with that statement.
Yes.
Carry on.
Exactly. So because she's being asked to recuse herself. So prosecutors, in this case, basically the Special Counsel Jack Smith, who is Washington establishment guy who's going after Trump for insurrection, and who probably via the Justice Department had this Judge Tanya S. Chutkan appointed because he knows she's biased against Trump. So he has said to her, listen, we think, here's our expert opinion, is that we think that the claims that you are biased and should recuse yourself in this case are not valid and you should stay there. And she'll say, yes, I agree. Thanks very much. Next.
Yeah.
So,
and next was Donald Trump.
Yeah. So it's like this is an example of, you look at some facts and you draw, okay, you don't have access to all the facts. You're not going to get access to all the facts, but just on the facts that are available to you and the story that you're being told, basically, you say that sounds a bit dodgy. She sounds like she would be biased. I mean, based on what she said, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, her statements seem fairly prejudicial against Trump, and therefore, I think it's possible that she may have been randomly chosen. I mean, randomly selected in a kind of specific kind of way.
To stack the odds against Trump?
No, because she was biased. Because she's anti-Trump.
Because she's one of us.
And if I say that, then it's like, you damn conspiracy theorist, shut your mouth. Have you been listening to Russell Brand? Have you been listening to Joe Rogan? I'm like, no.
And imagine she's so... I imagine she sees herself as a professional, right? And that she's trying to make this as objective and judicial sounding as you possibly can. But if one of her comments that you highlighted was that Trump supporters claim that, well, in fact, what motivated them to do what they did was because they were angry that their guy didn't get the power. That is the quintessential political position to take. She said, their guy, our guy, my team, your team.
Yeah, well, it's biased, right?
Giving an implicit political position.
Right. Their guy. Of course, she could be being impartial and saying, no, it's like, I'm just looking at it from the outside or whatever, but it's pretty suspicious. But if you're suspicious about things, it usually means that you're a conspiracy theorist, and that you read and kind of maybe do your own research and stuff like that, which is pretty serious.
You don't want to do that.
Yeah, she said there's blind loyalty to one person who, by the way, remains free to this day. By the way. Is there anything, can you infer anything from that statement? By the way, he remains free to this day.
She's, first level, she's saying we haven't put him away yet. So we're Democrats and everything's fair. But there's an implicit threat. He may not always be free.
It's very, very ambiguous when you say it's blind loyalty. First of all, you're saying these people are just fanatics that she's sent to jail, the guys involved in the insurrection. And it's just blind loyalty to Trump, who, by the way, remains free to this day. Why would you say that he remains free to this day? Of course, everybody knows he's free to this day. Are you saying he shouldn't be? Is there something, is there an implication that he shouldn't be freed?
She's giving away her wish as to where this will go. Okay. Yep, as Trump says, it's all rigged.
And I mean, so she's going to oversee a case on whether or not Trump was involved in insurrection, which hinges on the idea that there was an actual insurrection, because it's much easier to tie him to and condemn him or convict him of a serious crime like insurrection or treason, whatever goes along with that, as long as you establish that there's insurrection. If you don't have the idea, if there's no evidence, or it's implausible or just hyperbole to claim that there was some kind of actual insurrection, this was an actual attempted coup if you don't have that, then there's not much, you wouldn't really, what's Trump going to be accused of? Making a noise outside, encouraging people to be rabbly outside the Capitol Hill. That's not a crime, right? You need the insurrection thing.
Yeah.
And she's the one, so she, not so much that she's the judge who'll be overseeing or trying the case, trying Trump on whether or not he is guilty of insurrection, of aiding and abetting or contributing to insurrection. And she is obviously clearly convinced that there was an insurrection, because she said this was nothing less than an attempt to violently overthrow the government.
Right.
So she's obviously not impartial in any way.
She's assuming his guilt at the beginning.
Well, yeah, by saying that, you know what I mean? It's basically by saying that she's convinced, that she's made a statement that this was nothing less than an attempt to violently overthrow the government. She is already biased, because that's the only thing that really will determine whether or not Trump gets any significant charge out of this.
Sentencing.
Or sentencing.
Yeah.
So, like, tying him to it is going to be pretty easy, I'd say, for them. But it's taking it as a given that there's an it there already, i.e. an interaction, is the bias, is the prejudice. And she's clearly guilty of that prejudice. But that's justice in America. What about did you see, talking about American politics, you see JFK Jr, RFK Jr,
RFK,
WFK,
Bobby. Yes,
Bobby Jr.
Curious, wasn't it? He was.
Well, that's another thing. But this is just have a listen to him here. It's really interesting, the state of American politics and what passes for American democracy.
Hey everybody, it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. here. Well, today the DNC did convene its Rules and Bylaws Committee, but sadly, not much has changed. Our primary is still not free and fair. The DNC is continuing to coerce New Hampshire to bend to the wishes of President Biden's re-election campaign. And if New Hampshire doesn't comply, then the votes of the people of New Hampshire won't count. And of course, there was no mention in the meeting of separating the Biden campaign financially and organizationally from the DNC. The DNC, by its own charter, is supposed to be impartial, but they're not even bothering to pretend. Meanwhile, our campaign is unstoppable. We continue to build momentum. We're getting giant crowds. We have over 200,000 volunteers. The contributions are coming in, and I want to thank all of you for your support. In signing that petition to the DNC, we generated over 30,000 signatures in the last 24 hours. And I got to personally speak to so many of you and hear your concerns for our democracy and for our country. This is only the beginning. We're going to take back our country. We have a people-powered movement, and I want to thank all of you for your continued support, and God bless you all. And God bless our country.
So the point he's saying there is that like obviously there's no distinction between the DNC and the Biden campaign. Like the Democratic National Committee is there to, represent the Democratic Party. It is the overseer of the Democratic Party in America, and obviously there's any number of candidates, Democratic politicians or people who want to put their names forward for positions within the Democrats in American politics. But as he's saying there's basically no room between. You can't put a piece of paper between the DNC and the Joe Biden re-election campaign. Joe Biden is just one Democrat. He's just one dude, one old dude who happens to be a Democrat and is running for president. And in the interest of the Democratic Party, you should be focusing on the person who's the best for the country, best for democratic values, for what the Democratic Party stands for, and also,
most likely to win in a fair election.
And also most likely to win in a fair election. Of course, but apparently Joe Biden ticks all those boxes, according to the DNC. And as you mentioned there, it's like ridiculous state of American politics or democracy is that New Hampshire, somehow the DNC is telling the New Hampshire division or whatever the Democratic Party that if they don't agree to vote for Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee, then their votes won't count. They will just trash your votes. We're not interested in you voting for anybody other than Joe Biden. It's like, well, Bobby Kennedy, he's put his name in the hat as a Democratic candidate. Can we vote for him? No. If you vote for him, we're going to trash those votes.
Yep. As above, so below. Just translate that nationwide.
Throw them out.
I mean, that's the same thing in 2016. Hillary Clinton, how does she get in ahead of Bernie Sanders, who drew in the same kinds of crowds Trump did?
Mm-hmm.
Stadiums full of crowds. Yeah. And he's turned out to be a wishy-washy yes man for war and everything else that this current regime wants. But still, same thing.
Yeah.
It's a joke. And it was such a bad mistake, and they doubled down on it. The lesson they would have ought to have taken from 2016 result was that, holy shit, she was such a bad choice. We lost to Trump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, that wasn't what they went with. They brought in Joe Biden, who was notorious in the 1980s because he was kicked off as a nominee in 1988 because he lied about his academic background. Shit, that's nothing these days. The man lies every single day. His lie this week was that he claimed that he had once taught at a university in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh or something. Back in the day when I was teaching such and such a course at the university,
along with Corn Pop,
he just said it. Like, he lies when he doesn't have to.
That's the dimension.
I don't know, is it? He's been doing it since 88, and
other.
in 88 it was noticeable,
and
the system corrected itself and said, this guy is not, he's not running.
Well, if you've got a pathological liar under normal circumstances, is just going to lie all the time, obviously, and then you give them dementia or growing, increasing dementia, well then
it becomes forgivable.
It becomes a lot worse. Like you got, I mean, you know what I mean. It's going to be a mix of lies and forgetting stuff. You know what I mean? Genuine mistakes. But Bobby Kennedy, RFK Jr. If you just saw one up,
that was New Hampshire, but then he went to California.
He was in California and close to where his father actually was shot in LA. He was speaking at a talk basically, and some dude popped up. If you just go down, according to a statement issued by his campaign, a man who claimed to be part of Kennedy's security team told them that he needed to be taken to the candidate immediately. His security then spotting a gun. They removed him from the area and notified the police. The LAPD confirmed that a man with a loaded gun and a shoulder holster and a badge stating he was a U.S. Marshal, identified as Adrian Paul Aspero, 44, was arrested and taken into custody. And
he should also be charged with impersonating a federal officer. That's crazy.
He said the campaign also claims that there was a second man who was arrested by the LAPD along with the prime suspect, who had a backpack that contained at least one other handgun, multiple knives and extra ammunition. And so just a few months ago there, Kennedy, and this brings up this issue that he brought up a couple of months ago, and he brought it up again. He claimed that since his father's assassination in 1968, all candidates for president have been provided with secret security protection. But after 88 days of no response and several follow-ups, he received a letter from the Biden administration saying that the protection for him is not warranted. So basically, he's still not getting any Social Security, or not Social Security, Social Secret Service. He's probably not getting Social Security either, but Secret Service protection.
I think this was a message.
Well, yeah.
That's too coincidental.
It's an attempt to intimidate.
We'll see now. There'll probably be no... well, let's take a bet on this, right? I'm speculating here. There'll be no follow-up. The guy we'll never hear about again. He was put there. And it's right next to the same convention center in LA where his father was shot. That's the kind of icky stuff the current regime does.
It's just
messages.
It's mafia stuff.
Yeah.
And the reason they don't want Kennedy and the reason they want Biden or Hillary Clinton and then they double down for Biden is because both Clinton and Biden are members of the establishment who are happy to be prime minister or president and just to fulfill it as a ceremonial position for the kudos, for the grandeur, for the money-making opportunities he provides, but they simply hand over the keys. Once those people like that get into the White House, it's understood that they're handing over the keys to the White House, effectively, and the functions of the White House to the intel agencies.
Biden can go to the beach every 3 hours and have a nap.
And whoever, some establishment politician would just do nothing. They would just go for naps, go play tennis or whatever, and the intel agencies who actually run America, they don't want any interruption in their job of running America, and they would have an interruption.
And the empire.
Yeah, and the empire. And if they would have an interruption and they would have a headache if someone like Trump were to get in again. Because he's like, oh, I'm president, I'm going to do the presidential stuff, right? I'm going to use, what kind of powers does president have? Okay, see all these powers? I'm going to exercise those. See the one where it says, it's just customary for me to listen to CIA briefings every morning? I'm not going to do that customary thing anymore. So the CIA can go freaking fish, right? It can go do whatever else it does, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to relook at our foreign policy. I'm going to make some new decisions, upend things a little bit. I'm going to make friends with that fat kid.
Bobby Jr. has been more...
Over in North Korea, huh?
Yeah. Bobby Jr. has been more explicit than Trump ever was.
Yeah.
I don't fault Trump for this because clearly he was kind of... When we finally kind of grokked what he was up to all those years ago, he dissimulated... They said he was a liar, compulsive liar, and he never really says what he's thinking. That's because there was strategic enclosure. He actually had plans. We know that in hindsight because he brought in Michael Flynn on day one and they had to conduct a quick op to get him off. And we know that Flynn had plans, and Flynn knows, as he recently told the Patrick Bet David podcast, he knows where the bodies are buried, metaphorically. But Bobby Jr. is much more explicit. He's kind of, I suppose, old school, more clean cut. He's going to have it all up front. This is, of course, the reason why he can't be elected. Trump at least was cagey enough to pass muster to become the GOP candidate in 2016. Bobby Kennedy's like, I'm going to remove the CIA's ability to conduct its own ops. It's no longer, it's going to be revert to what it was supposed to be in 1947, which is an intelligence gathering arm of the government. It's not going to have its own operational side.
Well,
he's not the first to say that, but it's a long time since anyone said that clearly as an election manifesto. Here it is, point number 3 or whatever. Boom.
Yeah. Well, I don't understand people who say that. And I would assume Bobby Kennedy, RFK Jr., given what happened to his father and his uncle, he knows what these people are capable of. So to turn around and say the same thing that arguably got his father assassinated, or his uncle assassinated, i.e. I'm going to, break apart the CIA and bring it to heel. I mean, does he just think that they don't...
Are you saying it's a death wish? I know.
But does he just think they don't do that anymore? Or that it's a different circumstances now and it's not possible for them to do that? Does he have some understanding?
Maybe it's the latter. One of the criticisms that skeptics, so genuinely left critical skeptics of the US government have about Kennedy, besides his Israel shtick, which, yes, I know that doesn't look good either on paper, but besides that, it's the number of times that guy, Michael Tracy, could pull up dozens of photos from relatively recent years of Bobby Jr. hobnobbing with people as distinguished as
Right.
Hillary Clinton in DC. The thing is, he is so connected. He is patrician.
Right.
I think he's banking on some kind of guarantee that there's so much light on him at this point, 40, 50, 60 years later, that everybody knows that you can't do that anymore. I know it's a hell of a bet to make,
but I mean,
but
like, what about heart attack machines or something? Microwave
they don't
beaming
have
heart
to-
attack machines. Like, you can come down with like a serious illness all of
or
a
the
sudden.
plane has a fault.
Yeah, your plane crashes.
I know, but he's going to die trying.
Well, fair play to him.
It's brave. He's super brave.
Yeah, there's talking about intel agencies. Did I send you that already, Scotty? No, maybe not. Yes, intel agencies. So this is actually from this is the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic, which is a Select Subcommittee that was, set up of the US Congress. It was set up to investigate COVID, all things COVID. This is their Twitter account. And they're saying new testimony from a highly credible whistleblower alleges that the CIA rewarded 6 analysts with significant financial incentives to change their COVID-19 origins conclusion from a lab leak to zoonosis. Just click on the first left one there. Maybe we need to zoom in a bit or not. Anyway, so the meat of it is that a multi-decade senior level current agency officer has come forward to provide information to the committees regarding the agency's analysis into the origins of COVID-19. According to this whistleblower, the agency assigned 7 officers to a COVID discovery team. The team consisted of multidisciplinary and experienced officers with significant scientific expertise. According to the whistleblower, at the end of its review, 6 of the 7 members of the team believed the intelligence and science were sufficient to make a low-confidence assessment that COVID-19 originated from a lab in Wuhan, China, which is already a hangout, but whatever. The 7th member of the team, who also happened to be the most senior, was the lone officer to believe COVID-19 originated through zoonosis. The whistleblower further contends that to come to the eventual public determination of uncertainty, the other 6 members were given a significant monetary incentive to change their position. So old school, here's some money, shut up about something really important here in terms of COVID and the way COVID was presented and how it upended the entire world, at least the Western world, and affected so many people's lives. This is a key point, whether or not it came from a lab or did not. Of course, it was conspiracy theory territory to suggest it came from a lab, because if it came from a lab, then there would be a serious pressure on to find out, to share the information of the nature of this particular virus and very quickly come to a determination whether or not it was deadly, whether or not there should have been lockdowns, whether or not people should have been harassed and banned and fired from their jobs, and whether or not people should have been forced to get an experimental vaccine. All of that would have been in question if it was known to have come from a lab. So they had to shut down the lab leak theory. And yet the CIA, this is the testimony from a multi-decade senior level current CIA officer, testimony to Congress by him, saying that that this team was put together on the CIA of CIA operatives with relevant scientific expertise to look at this question of whether or not it was most likely to have come from a lab or most likely to be of natural origin. And 6 out of 7 of them said, yeah, most likely we're going to come down on probably a lab. And yet,
because they were bribed,
one guy who was following the advice, obviously, of some higher ups, said, no, this is natural origin. And then somebody, which is interesting, where did the money come from? Who paid the money?
Fauci.
It wasn't the one senior guy. He didn't take money out of his paycheck to pay off his 6 fellow colleagues. Obviously, money came from somewhere, hush money, to get these guys, which they did, which is obviously not very honourable, to then change their opinion to say, but at least they weren't willing to turn to say, to go fully flip to, no, this was zoonotic, they all agreed on it being, don't know, uncertain. But still a lie based on their assessment that it was most likely to be a lab leak. And of course it was a lab leak. It was created in a lab. It was released from a lab. It probably wasn't Wuhan. You bring it up to the geopolitical level and it's most likely it was created in a lab in the US and dumped on China in September, October 2019. And from there it spread and the lid was put on all knowledge about it being the origin of it. And governments all ran with this idea that it was this deadly virus that had jumped from a bat to a pangolin to a pygmy shrew and then back to a butterfly and up people's noses, and that your granny was going to die if you went near her and you locked down, and if you don't get a vaccine, you're going to get fired from your job.
And now your kid has autism because of these 6 bribes, because they didn't develop correctly.
Maybe, yeah. So,
seriously, the whole entire science, at least at that juncture in the process, the entire science hinged on 6 bribes. Yeah. This is actually an example of the CIA doing what it was created to do. Mm-hmm. Intelligence gathering, making a report, sending it up, and on the balance of probabilities, recommending one decision over the other. And then money comes in from somewhere else. Not CIA per se, right? Mm-hmm. It's extra governmental. This is why people have the term deep state, because it's power politics. It's not from an official institution. Black budgets, somebody, and it would have been, and it couldn't just have been anybody. It would have been somebody who carried the stature with the implied threat behind him that there would be more than just, if they did not accept said bribes, there'd be more than just, off you go, then there will be other threats.
The comment from this one guy who was, knew which way the wind was blowing, the one of the 7 who said no, it was natural in origin, despite the evidence that it wasn't.
Okay,
he would have basically said, listen, or someone higher up might have come in and said, listen, that's the whole lab leak theory is not something we're going to go with, so you need to rethink what your eyes are telling you here, because we don't want to go with that. It's not good. And here's, there's a bonus in it for you if you get a bonus for good work for, lying. You get a bonus for lying. We're going to give you a bonus if you lie on this one. Well, okay. I can do a bit of lying for a bonus, yeah.
The first person I'd hold up for questioning would be, if not Fauci himself, then Bill Gates.
Yeah.
If you read the book by Bobby Jr on COVID-19, there are lots of vignettes of evidence of how this kind of works and has worked over the decades, not just with COVID-19. But the key unspoken structural point to this, until now anyway, is that the vast funding for scientific research, at least at the official level, the public level, who controls the purse as to where grants do or don't go for research is Fauci. But his main backer, again at an official level, because this isn't the end of the story, but his main backer officially is Bill Gates. And what they do together is they're like a tandem.
I have a solution to that. I put the two. I put Bill Gates and Fauci in the Colosseum, right? Give them spears, whatever, and then say the one who walks out alive is guilty.
It's not the end of the story, because as explained by Bobby Jr., since the late 1980s, 70 or 80% of Fauci's salary is paid.
Yeah.
By
Actually,
Pentagon.
Yeah.
You said Pentagon.
/Pentagon.
Where in the Pentagon?
Well, actually, just to bring it full circle, he was actually speaking to Russell Brand on this, and it's 6 or 7 minutes, but it's actually worth, because it basically spells out what we're saying. If you just have a listen here, I think it's worth listening to. This is a few months ago, Bobby Kennedy Jr. talking to Russell Brand that we started the show with.
And I had to kind of put together this history, which was fascinating, because, why was the CIA so involved with gain of function and so obsessed with it? And I went back and kind of traced this history, which is the CIA was created in 1947. And the first task that it was given was Operation Paperclip. which had already been ongoing. The Joint Chiefs were already bringing it over, but that was bringing over all the Nazi weapons scientists, many of them who were destined for the gallows in Nuremberg. And the CIA created these rat lines to smuggle them out from under the nose of Nuremberg prosecutors and bring them over to Fort Detrick and to other these, weapons labs. A lot of them were nuke scientists, but a lot of them were bioweapons scientists, because Hitler and Goebbels Goering had a huge bioweapons program, and they'd done a lot of work on it. They had a lot of cutting edge stuff. At the same time, the biggest bioweapons program was in Japan, and it was managed by a scientist called Shiro Ishii, who was just this diabolical Mengele-like scientist who was doing human experiments that were, as bad as anything that the Nazis did. But he then was brought under the U.S. wing and protected from the Russians who wanted to hang him. And they brought all those scientists over. It was called Japanese paperclip. So in that program, they brought all the Japanese scientists, and those scientists who initiated the U.S. bioweapons program at its birth, not only imprinted it with a lot of their, cell cultures, et cetera, but also with a lot of their, I would say, ethical elasticity or ethical lacunae. So and that continues to, to sort of infect the entire bioweapons program. Now, we put huge amounts of money into bioweapons. In 1969, we had nuclear equivalents. They were bragging that they could kill everybody, basically everybody in the world, for 29 cents a person, 29 cents a death. This is what they were. This is what they were going for. That's success. They do the opposite of science. They were, scientists are the opposite of medicine. Medicine tries to save people's lives. All of these, microbes, et cetera. And they were trying to enhance the microbes to make them antibiotic resistant, to make them spread faster, to make them deadlier, et cetera. 1969, Nixon goes in there and shuts down the whole program. And everybody's shocked. And those guys were very angry. Now, here's what happens. And they're living in the basements of the Pentagon, and they're trying to bring this back. The CIA is secretly doing bioweapons. They leave Fort Detrick with all their cultures illegally, and they store them in these warehouses in New York. And they're trying constantly through the neocons, who become their allies, to revive the bioweapons program. Then 9/11 happens. And 9/11, the neocons bring off of the shelf the Patriot Act, which basically is the beginning of the surveillance state in our country. And nobody reads it. The only congressman to read it was my campaign manager, Dennis Kucinich.
I remember that.
He was in Congress at that time, and he told me not one copy was available to any congressman. The 350 Act that suddenly appeared the day after 9/11. And that dismantles basically the United States Constitution. Interestingly, that act, which nobody read, had a provision in it that revokes effectively the Geneva Convention and the Nixon's bioweapons charter. So all of so it basically relaunched the bioweapons arms race. There were two guys who were blocking it, Patrick Leahy and Tom Daschle. A week later, they're stopping it. They're not going to let it pass. A week later, they get envelopes filled with anthrax in their offices. Congress is shut down. They're shut up. And while Congress is shut down, the Patriot Act gets passed. And the Patriot Act relaunched the arms race. So the military begins. And by the way, that anthrax, which was also used as the excuse for going into Iraq and invading Iraq because Saddam Hussein did it, we were told. It turns out after a 2-year investigation, the FBI came back and said that anthrax was Ames anthrax, highly sophisticated. There's only one place in the world it could have come from, Fort Detrick, which is the CIA Pentagon lab. So at that point, the Pentagon begins pumping a lot of money into bioweapons, about $2 billion a year, but they don't want to do it because they don't know if the Patriot Act is actually, legal. Because the Patriot Act, what it says is, we're not revoking the Geneva Convention, we're not invoking the bioweapons charter, So we're making a law that any federal official that violates those two bills cannot be prosecuted. So the treaties are still in place, but they give an exemption to all
Pseudo
federal
laws.
officials. The Pentagon's not sure that that's legal. And by the way, if you violate those provisions of Geneva, it's a death penalty. You get hanged. So they were worried about doing it. So they, instead of putting it in-house at the Pentagon, they put it all in NIH in Tony Fauci's shop. They give him a 68% raise, which is why he became the highest paid federal official in history. He was making more, $450,000 a year. The president only makes $400,000, but it's because of that military salary he got, the 68% raise in the military. So he had to do bioweapons development. That's why he was doing gain of function. And then in 2014, 3 of the bugs escaped from labs in the United States, and everybody finds out about it. Congress has hearings. 300 scientists write letters to Obama, sign a letter to Obama saying, you got to shut down Tony Fauci. He's going to create an epidemic. Obama shuts down all of Fauci's projects, orders them closed, has a moratorium, but Fauci doesn't shut them down. He continues doing them, and then he starts shipping everything over to Wuhan, where he can do it offshore, out of sight of these federal overseers and all the nosy scientists like Richard Ebright and the others from the Cambridge Working Group who were horrified by what he was doing. And that's kind of why the short story of why we're doing all this stuff in Wuhan rather than doing it at University of North Carolina and Galveston, which is where they were doing it before.
Bloody hell, Robert.
Bloody hell, indeed.
So what I got out of that was hang Fauci. Fauci needs to be hung,
according to international law,
hung under Geneva Convention.
YouTube says international law trumps. So yeah,
him and those funding him.
I would like first though to get answers out of him as to he should name names, because if he's just put away, there's still this whole network behind him that used him.
He was just a bag man. He was just a gopher really. He got well paid, but he didn't really know what was going on. I mean, in a certain sense, like that whole Wuhan thing that he was involved in, he got hung out to dry in a certain sense.
Yeah.
But that's how they do things. Like the people behind the scenes who don't show their face and who orchestrate these kind of maneuvers, they have these people in public positions who have a lot to lose, and they become their greatest defenders. They become the greatest cover-up architects because they create something. They like in this case, like Fauci was engaged in gain-of-function research in Wuhan because he didn't want to do it at home because it wasn't allowed at home. So he was doing it in China in a lab that they were basically renting in China. And so he's immediately exposed there because he's exposed if the people who are really running the show behind the scenes, like the CIA, etc.,
ever pin a leak on
Wuhan.
Wuhan.
Just drop a leak in Wuhan, and then it's like Fauci's like, no, this is not a lab leak.
He will immediately do everything he needs to do to cover it up.
Yeah,
like
to save his own.
Help get briberies to make sure the Senate hears the right things
to save his own skin. Yeah. So he was a patsy in that respect, but he didn't get completely thrown to the wolves. Yeah, pretty pathetic, pretty sad, pretty sad.
Speaking of Fauci in the gladiator's uniform.
It'd be funny.
I'm not your wife, but can I ask you a personal question?
Yeah.
How often do you think about Rome?
All the time.
This is a curious trend. Got a WAPO report on this, but apparently it's started on TikTok. Wives are asking their husband how often they think about Rome because they've been astonished at the answers. Quite frequently, it seems. Scroll down there a bit. It's been almost 2,000 years since the Roman Empire. Probably less than that, but whatever. But many men still contemplate it quite a lot. A new social media trend prompting women to ask the men in their lives how often they think about ancient Rome reveals that it crosses the minds of many men on a weekly basis, even daily, or more. The women are confused, and they ask their men, well, why? What's the? And they're like, well, what's not to think about? The answers are totally varied. They can be out and about and see a column or a pillar and a piece of architecture, and it reminds them of Rome. They can be thinking about sewage systems, and it reminds them of Rome. So there are kind of like basic material, mundane, day-to-day reasons for it. I reckon there's a lot more to this, though. I think people are thinking about Rome
Because it's happening again.
because the fall is happening again.
Collective memory, the conditions that preceded the
Mass
fall.
unconsciousness is speaking to itself.
The
It's
con-
coming.
The
through in
conditions that
various ways,
preceded
but-
the fall of Rome, or you could arguably say caused the fall of Rome, are actually prevailing in the Western world today, particularly in America. So yeah, that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah.
You ain't got nothing more either, do you?
No, not really.
You don't got
No
nothing
change
more.
in Ukraine.
No.
I thought it was curious, though, that just as Musk was clarifying the question about his Starlink satellite internet service covering Crimea in an attempted sneak attack a year ago,
Yeah.
that day when that was kind of in the news,
Storm Shadows
Storm Shadows
supposedly
launched
hit a couple of a submarine and a ship that were in dry dock.
in Crimea.
Yeah. In
These people
Sevastopol.
are like, and you know, the reason it was topical was because Musk was like, well, I don't want to set off World War III. And then some shitheads back in
Jimmy, yeah.
under a
Yeah.
bunker somewhere in
Decided to
London
say,
or
yeah.
Washington said, well, what's this?
That's the
Well,
whole,
we
the whole
can
point.
do this and Russia won't retaliate.
Yeah.
Not directly, anyway.
Yeah, don't worry about World War III. Look.
Talk about
Look what we just did. A bear walks into a bar and says, give me a whiskey and a cola. Why the big pause? Asked the bartender.
Why?
The bear says, don't know, I was born with them.
A bear? Come on, Joe. Vodka. He wouldn't ask for a whiskey.
I don't know. American bear.
Russian bear. American bear. Okay, fair enough.
America's got bears too, Neil.
Why the big pause?
Well, you did, you know. Anyway,
But
that's as good as it gets. Yeah, so we'll leave it there for this week, folks. Thanks for watching, listening. Hope you enjoyed the show and commenting. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll be back next week with another one on, you know what it'll be on. But hopefully we'll be able to bring a little bit of clarity to anything that's murky. So until then, have a good one and stay safe and, I don't know, have fun.
Stay free, as
Stay
Russell
free.
Brand would say.
See ya.
God bless. See you next week.
Can't stop the signal now.